Cool. We have here Anthony Riley, one of the fastest Native Americans ever, ran for NC State. Anthony, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your current line of work, and then anything else that you want to mention, like, having kids and being a father. Kind of give me a little background on where you come from.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony Riley. Most people know me as Tony Riley. If you look at the NC State, any NC State historical records, be as Tony Riley. I come from the Pueblo of Laguna. I work for the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a program called Public Law 102477. I was recently in Alaska for 3 years and just moved home back to New Mexico, doing the same job. And I work with tribes all the way from Alaska down to the East Coast to the West Coast. And I love my job. I love what I do. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. I love them all. And, I am from the Pueblo, Laguna. Love it here. I'm currently, because of the pandemic and everything going on, I'm teleworking, have been teleworking since March, and it has been a little different, but I think the workload has certainly stepped up just because of all the issues that are happening across the country, in the Indian country, if you will. So, yeah.
Cool. What about what high school did you run at?
Oh yeah, I went to Santa Fe Indian School. I went to boarding school. Started as 7th grader and graduated as a senior. So I spent 6 years in Santa Fe Indian School. Graduated in 1989, and you talk about a little journey there. I didn't go to college right after high school when I graduated in '89. In fact, I took an extra year of high school.
Really? Okay.
To attend Northfield Mount Hermon Prep School. And it's kind of funny how I ended up at Northfield Mount Hermon Prep School. My senior year, I was recruited by a few schools, maybe one Division I school. The rest were all Division II, Division III, and I got into Harvard University, got into the second probably wave of applications, and got a call from the coach, and he goes, "Anthony, Tony, I regret to call you, but we got your SAT scores, and you didn't cut it." And all my hopes and dreams were smashed by that, and I didn't know what to do. And I ended up, maybe a month later, there was a young lady coming by through Indian country recruiting Native American kids and Native minority kids to attend this prep school. And then I didn't know that prep school had a very good cross-country team. And so that's how I got to NC State. I spent a year, working on my academics, because I was told by coaches, my family, and everybody that academics is, you got to be strong. You're going to get to that level. You can compete. You got the talent to compete, but academically, you have to compete in the classroom too. So that's how I got noticed by NC State and other Division I schools. And that's when Coach Raleigh Geiger recruited me at NC State, and that's where I ended up.
Yeah, Geiger's the legend. We were talking about that before. I had a high schooler go on a visit, and he was won over. He actually saw, we had a little Facebook communication, and he goes, "How do you know Riley?" I was like, "Really good Native American runner." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." And I was like, he's one of the big faces to Native run, and of course I know him. But yeah, he was fascinated. Why don't you tell me a little bit about, your college experience, your degree, and how that transition was going from the Southwest all the way over to the East Coast. How was that transition for you? I know you said you had kind of a tough first year, which I think is normal, but I don't think a lot of the youth are mentally prepared. I think they watch a movie and they think, oh, it's just going to be, smooth sailing, and then, it's tough. But how was the transition for you?
Well, to me, the transition, and most youth or Native American runners coming from a small school, and Santa Fe Indian School was a small school back in the day. We were class 2, so class 2 meant you had probably about 500 students, right? And in teams like that, you're an outlier. You're the best on the team. You're considered one of the best runners in the school. So coming from that environment and going to even just to that prep school, I was running with guys that were just as good or better than me. So I had to adjust, to that, not being the best on the team. Also need to adjust with other cultures. There wasn't just Native American. Santa Fe Indian School was all Native American prep school. Boarding school. So when I go to Northfield Mount Hermon, there's, you're going to school with foreign students. You're going, from all different classes, the very rich to the very, the minority, right? So I had to adjust there. The running was a little different. Everything like doubled at prep school. When I got to college, it doubled again. And then, as you know, that transition, one of my first days at practice was I got lost. I didn't run. I didn't do my summer running like Geiger told me to. Each college coach, if you get on the team, you recruit it, you accept it, they send you a packet, and that's your running homework, if you will, for the summer. I didn't do it. So when my first practice at NC State, I got lost.
Oh man.
And I'm running with guys that are all Americans, they're all ACC, they're high school all Americans, and the guy that I got recruited with came out of New Zealand. His name was Steve Blair, a very good friend of mine. He was a 406 miler. I was a 431. So right then I was already doubting myself. I was already wanted to pack up and go home. Academically, it was a different story. I struggle academically. So, you talk about that transition. Even though I went to prep school and I went to the boarding school, and you think that I was prepared, I wasn't prepared for that level of running. And so when I started sinking in, I started wanting to give up. But through the intervention of my coach and my teammates and my parents, they just said, you haven't even tried. You need to stay there. You need to get with the program. And that's one of the things that I had to do. I had to just suck it up and do what Geiger told me to do, right? If you're not into the program, then yeah, you're not going to make it. And that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, is that you have to accept your coach. Your coach has already recruited you, right? Based on the talents and all the things that you've done. You got there, your foot's in the door, but staying there, I had to adjust. I had to accept and do what my coach told me to do, was telling me to do. And that's, it took me a good probably year to adjust. That from that day, that first day when I got lost at practice, Coach Geiger came up to me and says, you're redshirted. I didn't know what that meant. All I knew was a bad thing, right? Normally you redshirt for injury or something like that, but I was redshirt because I wasn't ready. So I spent a whole year redshirting. That was hard to adjust because you can't compete, right? You can't dress up, you can't travel, you can't do all these things. So I was just on the sidelines trying to catch up, trying to get, in shape. And that was frustrating. But, so you know how that goes.
Yeah, it can be really tough. I always I keep numbers. That's what I do. But if someone doesn't train, and I tell this, and I actually think it helps them mentally prepare, and they're more likely to do it. I tell them if they don't do the training, the chances of them making past the first year goes up 5 times. They're less likely to make it if they don't come in shape. But if someone got a balance to talk with them, maybe present day communication with texting and call, that definitely helps. Just to keep communicating, and then I'll also send someone to check up on them and make sure they're doing the training like that. So for the hurdles you grew up with, you mentioned being lower income, going to an area that had various levels. How would you say your hurdles with that related to your community? Was it the same for your community? I mean, how was that dynamic? Do you think there's that relatability with your community? I mean, I see a bunch of people in native country, and I see a lot of talent, but sometimes I feel like they don't see as many many successful people as you were. I mean, how do you feel like you relate to the youth in today's time? What's your thought process?
Going on the reservation, you don't think about, especially in that culture, if you're rich in culture, money don't matter. So that I had to adjust, right? Santa Fe Indian School, it was okay. When I got to prep school, that's when I saw the biggest differences between cultures and levels of income was very apparent. I mean, when I graduated from the prep school, classmates that I was going to school with, their parents were flying them in helicopters, and they got a parking lot full of brand new cars. And I was just happy my dad was there to be with me at graduation, because that was more important to me, was family and the strong belief that I had both in our traditional culture and then also in my Roman Catholic upbringing. Those were the things that probably kept me there. And then I was strong in both, but that's what kept me there despite the differences in economic stature, right? So the equalizer was my talent, my running. That's where I made friends at different classes, right? You got the high class and the low class, in between class. It was my running ability was the equalizer. When people saw me perform, and that's what attracted friends from the different classes. And what kept me there was a strong belief that to have faith and hope, right, for why you're there. That strong the encouragement from the grandmas and the grandpas and the uncles and aunts that kept reminding me why I was there, what the purpose was. Because growing up, I grew up around runners, uncles, relatives that could have done it, that could have been there. So every time I felt like giving up, my mom will remind me, remember about your uncle, remember about your cousin, they could have been there. You're there, so be that outlier, be that one that breaks the ice for us.
Yeah.
So always those reminders that you're there for a reason, right? So that's what I can attribute my success to.
I had a talk a couple years ago with some of my guys, and I said, "You guys are all you're all mama's boys." And before I could keep talking, one kid goes, "Holy crap, we are mama's boys!" And I was like, "You guys are just now figuring this out?" And I proceeded to go into my conversation, and I go, "Guys, you're in particular, for whatever reason, your guys' moms have all made these remarkable sacrifices. They found some way to be a super mom and get you here, to get you to be successful. And that's, I hand in hand with culture. Okie Nave's a little bit different, but I still have my own perception on things. I have a couple variables that tell if someone's going to make it and be consistent. And one, either being culturally sound. And I see family as being part of culture. I mean, that's the way I was always raised, was to have the right priorities with the right people. And then, or religious, one of the native runners, they got to have a culture and or religious. And that's just something that I think helps them. And I would say there's a lot of troubles if they don't have that priority with, what are you running for? And I had a kid that had that existential crisis, and I go, you can run for yourself for a while, but eventually you got to have a bigger purpose. I mean, you wear
right.
It means something bigger. And as you were saying with Native country, you run for your family, you run for each other, and that's kind of that's kind of the critical thing that makes the Native community so fascinating with every other community.
Right.
Is there isn't idol worship the same way. It's more of, I ran to do this and this. I remember a mom telling me when her kid won state, she goes, I feel like we all did it as a family as he crossed the line. Right. And I just remember thinking that was remarkable. And, as I tell my kids, you're running for something bigger than yourself. You don't have that frontal lobe of the brain developed quite yet, but you're running for something bigger. I know it's hard to see, but stay consistent. You weathering out that first year is critical. You can get past that first year. It's a lot easier. So what about for, up and coming Native runners? what advice would you have for them as they transition to college? And then kind of the double back on that, if you feel like you're going to Acoma area, the Pueblo tribes, if you felt like they ran more consistently across the board, what effects did you think that would have on the community as a whole?
I think, ironically, back in the day, back before time immemorial, a lot of native cultures depended on running. It was a lifestyle, if you will. We ran for just about everything from, for prayers, or we run for religious purposes. We run to carry the mail, like my grandfather from the Hopi Reservation. They ran a lot, ran to hunt, and they ran year round, right? So in high school, I ran during the season. And then you take the winter off, you take the summer off. I never really prepared. So when I got to prep school or even to college, you ran year round. It was a lifestyle. It was bringing me back to something that our cultures have forgotten. If you didn't, I think I worked harder during the off season than I did in season. Because in season, you're just executing, you're racing, right? Summertime, I had to learn to build my foundation. That's the biggest lesson I learned at NC State. Is you need that summer running, that to develop that foundation, to build that foundation, to put in the miles, to put in the distance. Because when you get to first day of practice, fall practice, a couple of weeks of some workouts and stuff, all you're doing is racing. Every other week you're racing, you're doing something, you're doing speed work. You should have already had that foundation, and that's where if you're doing that, you can do that based on your age and how old you are through high school. If you start doing that, I've noticed over the years that the best high school running programs have a really good summer program, right? They're building on the summers. Another thing that I learned, and I attribute this to a great friend of mine. His name is Bob Haynes. He was All-American, All-ACC at NC State. And he's a guy that, if I ever to write a book, there's a chapter called What About Bob? I'm going to call it that. Because at one time, I think it was my sophomore year, we sat down and we were talking, and I just asked him, what made you do what you did? How did you get good? And he goes, follow me. What I found out about Bob was he did everything to the extreme. He took the toughest route, 10-miler route. He lifted weights. On the off season, he was doing a lot of extra stuff that if I didn't know that, I would have just been a mediocre, a marginal runner. But I followed him around for a summer, for a year. He had graduated. He was running for Nike, and I got to a point where I was doing workouts with Bob. So what about Bob? Bob Haynes. Look him up. He's a great runner. He's a great runner for NC State. But that's where that's what it took me to the next level. There's the conditioning, the cross training, the lifting weights, the diet, all those things you can do right now as a youth runner. So that's the biggest advice. It's a lifestyle change. Coach, you mentioned that. It's a lifestyle. But it's not a lifestyle that is so different from what we used to do long time ago. Our people used to do that. So we've forgotten that lifestyle, right? So interesting. You take a look at it a little different way. I wish I had known then what I know now. Maybe I'd have been a little better runner, but that's the biggest advice to youth runners around the country that are listening to this, that, pay attention to why runners are beating you. Pay attention to a Division I top runner, Olympic runners. They're doing things differently, right? They're buying into a system.
Yeah. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the lifestyle. And I was talking to a really fast Blackfeet runner, and we were talking about how there was a lot of great runners from Browning, where a lot of the Blackfeet runners are stationed. And he goes, we used to have a consistent streak of state titles. And he eventually said it, and I said, so what happened? And he, we had theories, maybe social media pulled them into different aspects. I think it's so hard in today's time where, you got, social media, you have Hollywood, and it paints this perception of what's successful. And that's what I mean by culture. When you have a priority on family, although it doesn't coincide with Hollywood the same way, it gives you some substance to what you want to do. And I think that's the hardest thing for, a lot of youth is seeing the longer term picture and not doing something, fun. When I was in college, I remember my dad told me, he just said, I didn't party. I was kind of a lame person, but I remember my dad saying, he goes, you can go hang out with everyone else and be just like them, or you can do something. And I went from the 22nd guy on the team out of 22 guys. And then the very next year I got to the 5th guy after opening meet and blew the doors open. And it was one of those things to where it wasn't very fun. It wasn't a very good path, but over time, I finally had this breakthrough that, I never thought was coming. I did PR for 2 years. And then just had a breakthrough and ran well. And it's, it was worth it when I was at the end of it, but going through it and having a lot of lonely days, I remember a story to my kids. I go, guys, I once didn't get a text message for 2 months, and I got a text message, and I was like, did my phone actually vibrate? And I opened it up, and my mom just got a cell phone, and she goes, what's up, dog? And if anyone knows my mom, I think that was especially funny. And I remember thinking, this is my life. I hadn't got a text message in 2 months, and it was my mom. And my dad said, he goes, that's the only lady you need in your life till you get done to the end of college. And then when I got out of college, I think they were just happy I met someone. I think they were happy, but, just having priorities, it's hard. I always tell kids to envision themselves, on the podium, running for someone. And I think that's what makes Jackson a good runner, is the ability to envision himself accomplishing something. It's tough.
Yeah.
One more question. But, for you kind of answered a little bit already, but how did you bring your culture of being Native into the sport of running, and how did it help you be successful?
I think running at NC State, I probably was the only Pueblo Native American Pueblo Indian from the Southwest on the campus of 28,000 students, and they were more interested in who I was once I started making a name for myself, and through interviews and newspaper interviews, and making, winning ACC championships and being part of the team, they wanted to know more about me. So, I was more than happy to share my culture, the Eagle dance that I participated in, the things that I do at home. I, made Indian tacos for my team one time, and just celebrated, or was happy to show a little bit about my culture. They embraced it. They understood who I was more. They had more respect for who I was. Prayers, things that we were taught at home. Do it before races, go out, and go out early in the morning and pray before you run. And just little things that helped me. I never stopped what I was taught, and I was never ashamed to show people who I was and how I was brought up. And I think once teammates and other folks and guys that I ran against respected me, then I felt a little bit more comfortable sharing my culture and not being embarrassed about it. And I think we're in a different time now, that even more so. There's a lot of focus on Indian country, and people want to know about our cultures and tradition. Of course, there are some things I don't share that are sacred to me, but I can share enough to where it's of interest to others. So going to school in North Carolina, I went to school with, and I found out, I didn't realize, you have different Cherokee tribes and the Lumbee tribes and different tribes there going to school. I would have never known until I joined a Native American Student Association meeting, and they were more interested in who I was, coming from the Southwest. And I wasn't shy about who I was, and I showed them a little bit about, you know, what we do and some of the cultures, some of the foods. And I think the food, but the fry bread and the tacos was a hit for
That's
my
universal.
friends. It's a kind of universal.
Yeah,
unfortunately, it's not too good for you, but it brought people together.
yeah, that's last fall we had fry bread hamburgers, and I remember there's a couple that didn't have them. I was like, never had fry bread hamburgers. And I go, if I ever travel to usually Window Rock, I'll find a couple places that have fry bread hamburgers. Definitely one of the best things. And I think a lot of people with Native tribes, they don't realize it's not a bad thing. I think they just don't know, but they don't realize how every tribe is its own culture. It's almost its own nation. You know, I was trying to explain that to someone because you know they didn't mean anything bad by it, but they were grouping everyone in. And I go, everyone's different. I go, I assure you, Oklahoma tribes are very different from Southwest. Southwest are very different from Northern. But I just said there is a commonality, and your wealth is your family and your relationships. And sometimes that can be the world's best thing. It's your culture that holds together. And then sometimes, you know, you got to choose your priorities. You know, even growing up, my dad goes, he's a great person, stay around him. He's not a great person, don't stay around them. And he goes, you will be a product of who you hang around with, whether you like it or not. Meaning, you decide, choose who you surround yourself with wisely. And I think that's hard. You know, it's not easy with all the distractions in today's world with growing minds and kids. But you know, your success, I guarantee you helped other people be successful. That was something that, you know, the kid is a state champion from Montana. Just picked him up from the airport. Just got his degree actually a year ago. He's a teacher and a coach. And when I picked him up from the airport and I was at Baycom, he got out of the vehicle and, you know, just said, hey man, glad you're here. You're going to have a good time. We're going to train. You know, you're going to eat, sleep, breathe, and you're going to get back into it. Cause he had a hurdle with his previous college, but, you know, came back into the sport. And I go, if you don't mind me asking, I always got to ask, you know, what was your main thing here? And he goes, I'm here because of Jackson. He shuts the door and he walks away. And then one of the other guys, said, you get mad? No. I go, he's doing something positive. I'm happy. And I had another speedster. He was a 1441 guy, little Hokie kid. Actually just talked to him, but his name's Brian. And same thing. Said, Brian, why are you here? And he goes, I'm here because of Jackson. And I was like, all right, cool. Yeah. So, you know, this one person's success made someone else be successful. Yeah. And it's not just him. I have run into our professors all the time, and they say, oh, so-and-so's here, and her teammate's here. So-and-so's here, and they used to run against in high school, and they wanted to be teammates. And it's remarkable how that chain reaction is with the Native community. One person does make a difference. It really does.
That person for me wasn't Native, but I mentioned him before, was Bob Haynes. Of course, there was other runners on the team, but, you know, when he paid attention to me, and that's something I know, I'm sure Jackson would do the same thing. People looking up to this, if you just put in the work, you can get to where I am. But remember, I'm 4 years ahead of you. So you can't compare apples to apples, right? There's some years in front of you that you have to work on. So don't think overnight you're going to be like me. And I understood that. But if you're just being consistent and buy into Geiger's program, you'll get there. And I would have never thought that I'd run a 342, 1500 meter, you know, sub, you know, 4 minute mile. I would have never known if I would have been a 1500 meter ACC champion and make it to the NCAAs. I would have never known if I would have won an ACC championship, cross country championship, and made it, you know, to NCAA more than once. And obtain, 3 All-Americans at a Division I without somebody saying, if you just put the work in, you can accomplish these things. And I had to believe it. That's the first thing is believe. If someone believes in you, then just do it.
Yeah.
And if you just follow them around enough, it'll rub off, right? So those are the things. And of course, my coach and the family, everybody, all that support was important. But when I looked up to a guy like Bob and your runners are looking up to a guy like Jackson, then that's the first step in the right direction. If you just put in the work, because I can imagine, I met Jackson. He's a hard worker. He is as good as he is because of what he's learned from you and others, right? He believes in the system. And if other runners coming behind him have that same mindset, that same strength to not give up, despite whatever happens at home, whatever happens with your relationships, whatever happens at school, you're still gonna just keep moving forward, right? You're gonna you gotta be strong mentally.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest thing I can say is that it's not easy. It's not easy at elite level. I know you're trying to build an elite program. But the biggest barrier is that what's going on up here. You have to believe. You have to be mentally strong to get to that level. It's possible.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I'll end on this. I had he broke the state record. I was just mentioning Zach Black, and when he graduated, I said, "Hey, me and my wife are we're gonna feed you. We'll go take you out to eat." I think we went to Rib Crib, if I remember right. And after we finished up, it's like, Zach, so what was your defining moment? What made you start training for break a state title? You were running 440s in the mile, and you had run 409 7 months later. What was the defining moment? And he goes, you used to have me say, I'm going to break a state record. I'm going to win, in the middle of his warm up and, sometimes in his daily life. And I didn't mean to, and he didn't take it wrong. I had, because in disbelief that it was something so simple, I started I had a panic laugh. I was just like, it wasn't just training. It wasn't doing this and this. It wasn't, it wasn't a million other things that I thought it could have been. And he was literally just telling myself I could do it. And he goes, after a while, after doing it consistently enough, I started to believe in myself. And I just remember thinking, and, just hearing it being repetitive, consistent, made him start training for state title. And he had to run a 17-second PR to break the state record. So it wasn't like it was, predicted. I think I got called crazy. Oh, I think he'll break the state record. And the guy's state record he broke was Ben. And Ben was back from college. He redshirted that year. Ben was back for college. Ben was at the race. And Ben goes, you think he's going to get it? And I was like, I think he's going to. And he's just like, all right, well, if he does, I'm going to get a picture with him. And I'm going to give him a hug and congratulate him. And they got a picture together. He gave him a hug and congratulate him. And he was just genuinely pumped to see this guy from the woods of Oklahoma come out of nowhere and break his record. So it was a cool story, just the belief, I think he was suggesting it wasn't always there, but he started to build it, like training started to build that he could do it. And that was something I thought was powerful. So that's mostly it. Do you have, before I leave you alone, do you have any quotes for any other folks out there, any up and comers, anything that, you lived and died by, any specific quotes?
I don't have any quotes, but the only thing you got to have is just faith and never doubt your abilities. If you're sitting in a position on a team at a higher level, post-secondary, elite level, you're there for a reason. So never doubt your talent and ability. And once you start doubting, here's the flip side. Once you start doubting, then the excuses start happening. You start talking yourself out of it. So never doubt your ability. If a coach believes in you and you're sitting there with Coach Mays, any other coach at Division I or elite level, you're there for a reason. So never doubt your abilities. Once you start doing that, then it's a rough road. But belief in a coach, belief in the system, that's most important. If you got your foot in the door, the next step is believing what you've been told by your coach.
Amen. I I agree. Well, I appreciate it. I'll stop the video and then I'll wish you thanks again.
Okay.